very speedy recovery. I also thank Dr. Somnath for partly managing this conversation and communication with me. And I thank for this opportunity to meet the participants and express my experiences with the people who are also trying to learn and trying to kind of get some training on the topic of GNSS and its applications and the domain which is now developing in India. So, with these words, I would directly go to my presentation. I will share my screen. It may take just a moment.
Yes, Dr. Dasora, you're visible. Your presentation, you please go ahead.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. So I will start my presentation. The title is GNSS and NAVIC for atmospheric and ionospheric research. I understand that Dr. From IIT, Professor is also having a talk in afternoon after me. So he will talk more about the atmospheric content of the same application. And since I have been working in ionosphere, partly I will cover both, and I will see that participants learn a lot in this particular domain in next 2 hours, 1.5 hour to 2 hour. My email people can note if they are willing to. The outline of my talk, I will start with some of the basics of GNSS and NAVIC, then how the atmosphere, ionosphere are actually concerned with the NAVIC or GNSS signal, how they affect and how we get the measurements, ionospheric parameters obtained from measurements, and then I will come to some of the results that we have been doing in terms of application of NAVIC and GNSS in our research domain. What are the opportunities that GNSS and NAVIC satellites offer to us as a satellite of opportunity? What are challenges ahead of us, and what is the way forward? So it's quite a lengthy thing, but then I would try to cover it in totality. So just to kind of who has not seen NARL as such or visited, I would just introduce 1 or 2 slides about NARL. It is under the Department of Space, Government of India, and we have a very straight vision to develop the capacity of predicting the behavior of atmosphere through observations and modeling. So we want to actually learn the atmosphere up to the level and get the skill and get the knowledge both and understanding, so that we can forecast the future stage of atmosphere and ionosphere at any scale and all scales. So that is our vision, and we are part of the Department of Space. Our present director is Dr. Amit Kumar Patra. Our website is narl.gov.in. We are located at the southern peninsular India in Andhra Pradesh at Gadanki, 13.2 north latitude. This is the NARL building structure. NARL has a facility of or capacity, a world-class facility and capacity to study ionosphere, middle atmosphere, and the lower atmosphere, and the systems and phenomena associated with each part of the atmosphere, and the coupling phenomena which actually couple the lower and upper atmosphere, and also the phenomena from the sun. It all began in 1993 with establishment of a national MST radar facility. This facility actually is one of the grand facility over Asia. It has been refurbished and now it is called the Advanced Radar, AIR radar. There is a, very high power lidar which can detect the temperature measurements. It can provide up to even 80 kilometers, from 35 to 80 kilometers. There is a latest digital ionosonde. We have the Indian Climate Observatory Network Tower for all the aerosol and other measurements, solar radiation measurements, stress gases measurements. We have a cloud radar in X-band. We have a dedicated ionospheric scanning mode radar. It's called Giri radar, and we have GPS and GPS network, and then a plethora of almost like 70 instruments within our campus. And Dr. Patra's vision is to expand this campus further, and to reach to those areas which are actually very critical and hot spot for understanding the contemporary effects of the humanosphere and atmosphere. So with this introduction, I will come to the basic connection of my talk. The satellite-based navigation actually is an old concept, very old concept, and it all began in 1960. I hope the participants have been listening in past few days about the development of how the satellite navigation has grown over past 7 or 8 decades. And here the emphasis is on the radio wave that we all know. It has two components, magnetic field and electric field fluctuations that propagate without any medium. These are transverse waves. So what we do is we use a radio transmitter on board a satellite, and it all started at the 145 megahertz and 400 megahertz dual frequency transmission. It was a old system in 1960. Its name was Transit, and it was used by US Navy. And at any given time there were 6 to 10 satellites available, and there was a global coverage. The radio receiver with the user of this kind used to be there with some kind of ship or user, whoever want to get a relative position with respect to satellite. So they used to get the Doppler, I mean the shift in the frequency as the user or the satellite moves. Since the satellite change in frequency or the motion of the satellite was known, so the motion of the user was derived. And this was kind of very basic system which actually worked for several decades. So, however, there are several issues and limitations. So to overcome them, simultaneously the GPS in USA and GLONASS in Russia have been developed. You can see the timeline, it's matching almost simultaneously. However, GPS took over by completing the whole system in 1995. And because of the disintegration of USSR, erstwhile USSR in Russia in 1991, the progress suddenly had a kind of break, and then they slowed the progress of the GLONASS. However, GPS from 1995 to present, they have several advancements, and there are block 1, block 2, block 3. They are called the ABCDEF blocks, and then additional signals are being generated, and several generations of the satellites have been. So right now there are 32 GPS satellites, and at the moment GLONASS is also fully operational with the 24 satellites in the orbit. Being human, we think a lot. This is just a cartoon that shows that if we think a lot, then what comes out. So the GPS was actually meant for positioning, as we all know, that it provides a XYZ at every time t of a receiver or an antenna placed anywhere below the constellation. Now people started thinking, then when the signal is there are effects, there are like what are the so many systems, how it works, what are the different working principle, and what are the applications. So applications have been growing. The GPS, as I said, it developed in 1995, fully grown system, and you see the application even after almost 25 years now, they have been developing. You have some latest application in last 5 years which were not known at the time when GPS was being thought and built. So this is how we progress, by thinking and by asking questions. At this moment, as you know, GPS and GLONASS are not only the global constellations. There are actually other partners like Galileo and Compass. The planned number of satellites are given here, but at the moment Compass also is named at BeiDou, and they have a full capacity of satellites. Galileo is still growing. They have something like 10 to 15 satellites which are seen in part of the globe. Frequency domain, I will come back, and they use different kind of coding, and also this I will not go detail because you may be already knowing it. Coming to the Indian system, we have started with IRNSS system. It's called Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, developed by ISRO, and also popularly known as the Indian GPS. At this moment, we know this system as NAVIC. NAVIC is a name which is called the NAV, Navigation by Indian Constellation, NAVIC. NAVIC, the NAVIC satellites actually are a mix of two different orbits. One is geostationary and other one is kind of geosynchronous orbits. And around 30,000 kilometer altitude, these satellites are orbiting. And out of them, 3 are the geostationary, which I have shown here in this cartoon, and 4 are geosynchronous. Now, what I want to say here on the right side is that spectral bands for radio navigation satellite system. And as you see, these are all satellite system bands in what we call as a radio band structure. Each frequency is given here. This slide I have taken credit to one of my ISRO colleague, Dr. Matyunjaya. And what he mentioned here is that GPS has L1, L2, and L5 signal. Galileo also has kind of a similar frequency but chosen the different bands, and Beidou also chosen different bands. We have NAVIC in L5 band here, one signal in L5 band, and another signal is in S band here, which is around 2.4 gigahertz, and one in 1.1 gigahertz. That is L5 and S band. That is at present the NAVIC signal in terms of satellite constellation for navigation. Just to recapitulate how GPS works for the people who are still not knowing GPS in a way, it works on a kind of phase of the signal it transmit. There are modulations on the phase or the carrier phase, which are actually having CDM and BPSK kind of modulation techniques. And each of the satellite has basic 3 modulations. One is that called course acquisition code, precise code, and navigation message. These 3 signals or the modulations are transmitted on L1 and L2. However, the individual L1 and L2 signals have a different structure that you might be knowing from the other talks. What I want to emphasize here is that when the signal travels from the space, then if it is vacuum, then it travels with the speed of light, as we all know. But if it is medium, like any kind of medium, then the refractive index comes into picture. So signal travels between satellite and receiver. So we can ask several questions. How far are satellites? How much time it takes to signal to reach here? What is the orbit of the satellite? How many signals we receive at a given time? How many are needful for the positioning? And the answer comes from the whole understanding of the system as a whole. So space segment, control segment, user segment, what they provide. Then going further into the space segment, there are 32 satellites, 6 orbital planes. Like, these are all answers of those questions. For any user of GPS or GNSS or even NAVIC, one need to start with all this segment understanding at the basic level. And these are all I have given just for reference, that these are called the low Earth orbiter orbits, and the one which are there in the GNSS, they are all Galileo, GPS, GLONASS. They are in the medium Earth orbit, MEO, 20,000 kilometers, and then geostationary is 36,000 kilometers. So these are the reference of the orbital altitude with respect to different constellations as a space segment. Importantly, 2 atomic clock on each GPS satellite for precise signal timing are installed. For each navigation satellite, the timing, the signal generation and the timing is a very, very important aspect, and that's how we get the precise timing and position. This I will not go into detail. These are all control segment, how GPS is controlled. And this is 24-hour solar cycle, 24-hour cycle of the GPS, like how it works throughout the day. User segment, we know we are having several different kind of receivers, like single frequency receiver, dual frequency, multi-frequency, reference receiver, several different kind for different applications. Receivers are there. Each receiver has the electronics, and it provides you the signal in different way. Like you can record the raw signal, raw data, phase range, carrier phase range, Doppler, the signal to noise ratio, or otherwise you can further convert it as a derivable in position, velocity, and time PVT solutions. For a good navigation system, position, time, and velocity have been kind of objectives. The objective, actually, if you really see on the left side, I have written when they started is that it was a defense objective, as we all know. The Department of Defense only developed. So they wanted to actually drop 5 bombs in the same hole and build a cheap set of device that can navigate anywhere around the globe for the US Army. So you see how it all started. And with that single motive, the GPS has achieved at the moment millimeter level accuracy using this satellite navigation. And even all other constellations follow the same kind of concept, and we are also growing in the same domain from using the Navig. Okay, so this you all know. Actually, the GPS signal travels 20,200 kilometer, and if you have any idea, it takes around 64 milliseconds to reach to us. Now, 64 millisecond is not a constant thing; it's a dynamic thing. Why? Because I will tell you later that signal has several kind of delays which are added. This is a rough idea, just assuming that geometrical distance, which is 20,200 kilometer, and the velocity of light. So this is where the whole game of the GPS is there, that what is the time delay between the signal transmitted and signal received, and then we use the time delay to compute several kind of products. So basic concept is that time of arrival is one of the method. Now, how to do a time of arrival? We all know that transit time into multiply by speed of light, it gives us range. And if the range is there from simultaneously 4 different satellites, then we can get the position. Range can also be obtained through the measurements. This is the modulation on the code. This is how the bit transition or the chip transitions are happening. These are both known for the receiver and the satellite. So a satellite can be kind of even recognized, and the distance of the satellite can be obtained from the code measurements. These are called the code measurements. The C by A code or the P code measurements. So there is a replica, and the cross correlation of replica gives us the differential delay or the time delay, which is taken from transmission of satellite to the receiver. If we know the time difference, then we multiply the time difference and get the range. If we only know time difference using one satellite, then this satellite could be anywhere in the circle. Then if we know from the 2 satellite, then we can have 2 different points where the intersection of 2 spheres or 2 circles. And then if we have from 3 different points, it's called triangulation technique, simple triangulation technique. You might have heard of it. We can get the position. And the fourth parameter is time. So the x, y, z and time. If we have 4 satellites, we can solve for the simple equations of this kind, position estimates, and get the x, y, z is unknown, and the rest all are known. What are known here is just I have mentioned here is this x1, y1, z1, x2, y2, z2, x3, x4. These are all satellite positions. When we are receiving the signal, these positions are known to the receiver, because the positions are also transmitted in navigation message. So the positions are known with kind of some accuracy, and these positions are then actually converted from these equations to get the x, y, z. We can solve this for the simple mathematical form. Okay, so this is the summary for the GPS working principle, that GPS works in terms of satellite orbit and 4 signals, and finally at each time the GPS receiver knows the exact position. There is an algorithm in the receiver that decides that which 4 signal, because as we know, something like 10 to 12 satellites, even from the GPS, single constellation are available. If you have multi-constellation receiver, something like 70 satellites are available. Now, how to select the best 4? So there is a algorithm that resides in the receiver memory, and that decides. So on the right side, I have shown you the effect of the geometry of the satellites. If the best geometry is available, then we get the the best possible accuracy in the position estimate, the mathematical accuracy. If this geometry is biased, then we will get the biased estimates, and this is how the realistically the satellites are distributed. So the satellite configuration and orbit design are all made in advance to take care of all these kind of issues. However, still we don't get the accurate position. So what is that is affecting? So the GPS measurements error, when we come to, you see now there are kind of a list of measurement errors. So the ionospheric error, tropospheric error, receiver noise, multipath, hardware error, so many ephemeris broadcast, satellite and receiver bias, then relativistic errors, then the solar radiation errors, then the pressure, solar winds. So many particular issues are there. Now just coming to the part of the atmospheric errors, I have put a number here in this slide. Why a number is coming here is that now we know over the years that what is each particular component when the signal travels, like signal travels in electronics of satellite, through the ionosphere, through the atmosphere, and the electronics of the receiver, through antenna, cable, everywhere. So if we put a number of the delay, which is actually in the nanosecond or millisecond, into converted into meter, then we find that the peak error coming from the ionospheric delay, as you can see, and is highly variable. It is not a constant. It's dynamically changing from space and time. And tropospheric delay is the second major component. Then all other errors, as you can see, they can be measured with different modeling techniques, or the processing techniques of the data, differential GPS, or the error corrections through different combinations. However, the ionospheric delay and tropospheric delay are cause of concern. The delay comes, as I said you, it is a refraction. For the MSc audience who are there, you can simply compare how refraction happens in the prism. So the change of the medium creates a refractive angle in the medium. Similar way, but in a more complex way, the radio refractive index of the ionosphere and atmosphere has been obtained. You can see the nice book by Radcliffe in 1972 to read further on the radio refraction or the radio propagation through ionosphere. So I have come now to the ionosphere. This is my after the introduction. I will touch upon some parts of the ionosphere for the people who are not knowing the ionosphere. Hope right now, sir, what is the number of participants, sir? Hello.
The computer says at present is 44
Okay.
to 50.
Okay, so then fine. So I will brief about the ionosphere. I was thinking that maybe more of MSc people will try to understand what ionosphere offers. So I have put some basic slides so far. So there is a day and night variation for the ionosphere. There are layering structures in the ionosphere which are known for the chemistry and the dynamics of the ionosphere. The ionosphere is a well-known subject for the larger physics and large scale variations. The sun is the governing body for all the which transmit the radiations and the energy which changes the ionospheric electron density. These are all electron density layers. So D layer, E layer, F1 layer, F2 layer, and F3 layer. These are the structure of the ionosphere. Left part is showing the basic tropospheric structure, and right part is the ionospheric composition. As we know that troposphere is up to 0 to 17 kilometer, and from 17 to about 45 or 50 kilometer is stratosphere. Then we have up to 90 to 100 kilometers is the mesosphere, and beyond that we call it thermosphere or exosphere, where the temperatures of the plasma and the neutrals govern the other number density and the diffusion. So the number density, if you see, the neutral atmosphere is very large, and it decreases initially linearly and then exponentially. However, the plasma number density, if you see, the electron number density is most of the time in throughout the atmosphere is smaller for all the practical purposes up to 1000 kilometers than the neutral atmosphere. So the ionosphere actually resides in the neutral atmosphere or in the thermosphere. However, it is maintained with photo electron and chemistry, and the ultraviolet, UV and X-ray produce ionosphere, and there is a solar minimum effect, solar maximum activity effect. The ionospheric profile, vertical profile, what I have shown you earlier, changes with respect to the solar activity, and the composition and their densities. The gaseous density and composition and the altitude, peak altitude also keep on varying. So that's how we receive the day-to-day, day-night, place-to-place, seasonal, intra-seasonal, and solar cycle variations in the vertical electron density profile. This is the basic background ionospheric structure. Now coming to this is like a very confusing slide for beginners, but if you see how ionosphere is having a forcing from the sun, from the lower atmosphere, and then the phenomena using the winds. There is a day and night. Then there are E and E dynamo regions, F region dynamos. Then there are generation of electric field and current. Then there are very special class of low latitude phenomena known as equatorial electrojet, then equatorial ionization anomaly, then equatorial temperature and wind anomaly. Then there are equatorial spread F in night time, and the control resides in the sun and also in the lower atmosphere. So it's a very complex slide, but it shows that how ionosphere varies and what are the forcing on the ionosphere. This is how ionosphere, global ionosphere looks like. I have just given a snapshot. It's like kind of a 24-hour global picture of the, you can assume is the electron density or the TEC, and you see that maximum electron density occurs at the latitude where the deep equator and surrounding regions are there. So this is the geometric deep equator black line, and the dashed lines are showing the plus minus kind of 15 degree. And you see this electron density during the daytime, noon, it is peaking. This is the noon at the moment, local noon. And then when the noon travels, these two peaks travel in space and time. So this is how our morning, noon and afternoon, if we have a receiver over India, will be seen. So we get the time series, we get the imaging of the ionosphere, we get this kind of scientific applications if we have the GPS. I will come back to it, but this is a snapshot for the local 4 o'clock evening hours at the Indian longitude. The production, loss and transport decide the complete phenomena. Now, okay, this is again for the beginner who are taking actually real interest in the signal and the GPS signal and the connection with TEC, how TEC is coming. So as I mentioned, TEC is actually derived from one of the old concept of the refractive index of ionosphere, which is a complex. However, under some assumptions, we can still get the equation for refractivity, and then we can get the group and phase delay. Here phase delay, and then there's the group refractive index. From the refractive index we can get the velocity, which is both phase and group. Then the velocity, we can get the delay, as I told you. From velocity multiply with the time, which is the phase delay or advance, because we compare with the c into dt and the actual phase and group velocities. So is a vacuum versus the medium, and what we actually get in this equation is the delay or the advance. So when we get the phase, we get the negative sign. So we understand that this is a phase advancing and group is delaying, means the modulations and signal modulations delay and the signal phase advances because of the ionospheric electron density. And this is how we see that the TEC is nothing but this is electron density profile. So what we see here is an integrated effect throughout. So whenever there is a line of sight through any section of the ionosphere, we get the integrated effect, which is from the satellite to receiver, and the electron density is integrated here. This is the basic electron density and TEC connection for the GPS signal. Coming back to the radio refractive index, this is defined from a simple equation from the previous theory that finally boils down to the temperature perturbations, partial pressure, and electron density and the frequency of the signal. So first two parts of the radio refractivity are actually defining the neutral atmospheric effect, and the last part is the ionospheric effect on a radio signal. Now we know that if it is L1 band and L2 band, then we can use this particular equation to derive the total delay, the geometrical delay for a given signal. So these are called the model equations, GPS model equations. Any transmitting or receiving system will have some model equation, and these are very important equation, set of equation for the satellite navigation. Left side is the total observed range, and then this is the geometrical range, then this is the clock of satellite and receiver, this is the tropospheric delay, this is the orbital error, this is ionospheric delay. As I said, this is coming as TEC and the effect of frequency. Then there are the electronic biases of satellite and receiver, and then there are part of noise and multipath. Same thing happens on the L2 band also. As you can see here, the change is seen here in ionosphere because there is a frequency dependence, and on the differential code biases because there is a frequency dependence, and on the multipath and noise also, which is also having a frequency dependence. So what we see that GPS has the range which is estimated by the receiver has frequency independent parts and frequency dependent parts. So how to get the frequency dependent and independent parts out of the range equations? That is what the important thing. So for the tropospheric delay or the frequency independent part, they are composed of the dry gas and water vapor. Since these are the microwave band, so water vapor is a very important part of, humidity is very important part of affecting the signal. The dipole component of water vapor directly affect the reflectivity, which is coming in terms of partial pressure and temperature. And how we estimate the tropospheric delay is we have to remove all the other delays to estimate this as a residual delay. In ionosphere, it is little easier. If we have two signals like L1 and L2, then we have to difference the delay. Then we get ionospheric delay. However, there are biases which we have to correct later on. But ionospheric delay can be obtained from a dual frequency receiver or any multi-frequency receiver with a combination of two frequency, because it is a frequency dependent and the relations are known. This is how the TEC looks like. TEC is nothing but the line of sight kind of delay. This is shown by yellow color. The red point, what we call is assuming that this is a layer and there is an ionospheric Pierce point, we can convert this yellow into the vertical with a simple cosine function of the geometry and get the vertical ionospheric delay or the vertical TEC. So this corresponds to some sub-ionospheric point on the Earth surface or the latitude, longitude, what we can assign to it, and one particular elevation. So ionospheric Pierce point and a vertical TEC is what generally people use in ionospheric research. Okay, so whether these applications are good or bad, when we talk about ionospheric delay, so they are actually opportunity for atmospheric research, because we know this signal can be used for our estimation of TEC and some other parameters I will tell you. But actually, if you really see, the GPS and NAVIC both are having several users. These users actually define the precision of accuracy, and the issues are here with the precision of accuracy in ionosphere comes from the ionospheric research. How to actually we use GPS signal for ionospheric research? So we need a receiving system with a particular antenna type and a receiver. We are using at the moment either Novatel receiver or the Septentrio receiver. There are several classes of Trimble and several you might be knowing by now in your workshop. This is how the data looks. If we see the data, they are called the RANEX files. Is the observation file, navigation file, MET file, several kind of RANEX files come. These are ASCII data, and we can see here there are dates, there are signal type of observations. Then each observation one can see for each satellite, G for GPS, R for GLONASS Russia, and there is I for India, E for Galileo, like this. So this is a format which is well known, and several help is available to read this format. This data comes, we read this data, and then what we do is we get the estimation of our TEC. TEC is estimated by the range difference, and these are the frequency parameters which are constants. We get the phase TEC, the code TEC, and then phi is the phase TEC. The code TEC we use, the modulation if we use to estimate the TEC, differential delay, this looks like this. Like one particular satellite I have shown you, it shows very highly noisy estimation. But as you see, y-axis is kind of more or less absolute scaling is there. But if you see here, if we use the phase, we know there are ambiguities in the phase in terms of first initial number. So if we differential delay of the phase we get, there are large amount of relative delay comes. However, you see the precision, very accurately the phase TEC comes. So this is absolute and this is relative and precise. What we do is we level these two to get the final product of TEC, and we remove this negative part of TEC using the bias correction. What are other parameters? So other parameters are like we get the signal to noise ratio from the GPS signal, which is nothing but S4 and sigma phi. So this is called phase jitter or the phase scintillation index, or the amplitude scintillation index, or the S4. We need to have a very high sample rate of data, more than 25 Hertz, to get the estimation of the S4 index and the phase jitter. This is how the TEC during the night time looks like when the depletions are there, scintillations are there. Just two examples I have given for GPS and GLONASS. This is Indian Standard Time, 19 hour means our post-sunset hours. And you see suddenly TEC starts decreasing, increasing, decreasing. And there are kind of rise in the scintillation index, then again decrease, then again rise. Similar happens for the GLONASS satellites. There are several studies with interesting studies. What are the variabilities associated? What are the effect of these scintillations? So I come to a point where I want to emphasize that there is a feedback. Like applications of NAVIC or GNSS, when we talk, it is opportunity for research. We can study the ionosphere or atmosphere using the signal, but it poses the challenges. Those challenges, again, we need to mitigate. And if we do not mitigate, it causes a major problem in the positioning. So the applications which require a precise positioning needs to follow the feedback loop. You study the ionosphere at better level, you understand the ionosphere, forecast the ionosphere, so that we can get the resolution of the extra errors because of the ionosphere. We can get the better positioning accuracy. There are several users of the precise positioning, and they are growing. So this is right now a kind of contemporary subject to study. What are the opportunities and challenges? I have listed, but no need to worry too much. Opportunities, we can use the range delay, we can use phase advance, we can use signal to noise ratio. These are the three things. There are several science problems from the science products available, like two-dimensional maps are there, global maps are there. Then we can use those observations for the regional and global data assimilation. We can use these products for the irregularity tracking. We can study the spectral slope of the irregularity, longitudinal differences. We can use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all other things for using this product. So these are the available product at the moment. And what are the scopes? So you see there are nighttime, quiet time, daytime, and space weather time issues with the ionospheric variability. This is one of the glimpse of some of my results from NAVIC satellite at Gadanki. Just wanted to show that those three satellites I have shown you, the geostationary satellite, at a given moment, these are the number of days, like 10 or 11 number of days observation continuously. As you see, this diurnal pattern is very prominent in ionosphere because of the solar flux changing. However, there are other effects. As you see, that the particular satellite number 7 and other two satellites show almost a difference of something like 14 to 15 TEC units on a same time. So this shows that there are longitudinal differences, because this satellite is crossing another longitude and other satellites are crossing other longitude. Now this changes on a day which is on the 6th January. You see how the satellite number 6 has overtaken the peak and other satellites are coming down, and this again changes when the satellite number 3 overcomes. So you see how the longitudinal differences, there is no longitudinal bias, there is a longitudinal differences which are dynamically changing from one day to another day, one time to another time. It's just a glimpse of one result, that in very close proximity ionosphere changes drastically. So that's how the ionosphere models and ionospheric understanding is still, we have limited understanding. They are not able to produce the same this thing. Other concern is the depletions or the scintillations. So scintillations nothing but when the plane wave is passing through the irregularity in the electron density, there are a lot of scattering and diffraction patterns that emerge on the ground. And when we put a receiver here, we see the time series with respect to moving satellites. So how it appears? It appears like a time series in scintillation. This is a basic structure, is a east-west scan of the irregularity. They are low density structure in a high density F-region plasma in the background, and when the signal passes through them, in any geometry it is cutting the signal, then signal has depletions in TEC because you see the low density regions, and scintillation because of the irregularities are of that class are affecting the plane wave from the GPS signal through the diffraction and the scattering, and even the fading, signal fading. So they call signal fading, depletions, and they keep on moving these kind of plasma bubbles. They move, and then they show several different kind of effects. Depletions in TEC and S4 I have already shown. This is I have already shown. Now just to widen your horizon, if you see the same plasma bubble which is in the post sunset using some air glow technique, it looks like a depletion in air glow. When you see through the radar backscatter, they look like vertical plumes in the radar. If you use a scanning radar, they look like a moving plasma irregularity in the radar with the different parameters. If you see through the TEC or GPS, you see here in the post sunset sudden changes in the TEC. Throughout the day, they are very smooth curve, and in the evening there are these scintillations, and you see the scintillation how it reflect in a single satellite signal here, and they cause the loss of log, cycle slips, and we can use the GPS satellite to actually track those scintillation and depletions. These are all, if we see the satellite link fixed in VHF domain also, they are seen in L band also and S band. There is a frequency dependence on the scintillation, and there are other studies using the rocket. This is how in 2001 study by Basu et al, very large scintillation patches were seen in VHF and the L band scintillation in terms of time. And is a global phenomena. It is nothing about India. You see here that the low latitude, equatorial and low latitude, this belt is very prone to the scintillations and depletion throughout the globe. So it is a issue with respect to the global satellite navigation system or the regional systems which are over Indian domain. Scintillation and depletions in the post sunset hours. When we translate this scintillation effect into positioning, how it looks like. So our recent work shows that when there is no equatorial plasma bubble and there is equatorial plasma bubble, you can see the difference clearly here, that the depletions, when there are scintillations, you see the latitude, longitude, and altitude of a receiver are changing. These are the kinematic precise point positioning results. This is a technique to get the very precise millimeter level accuracy. When there are no depletions, the millimeter level accuracy is obtained. They are a straight line. You can see the residuals. However, when you see here, suddenly 4 to 10 meters or even 25 meter of error is introduced in the night time. The error is highly variable. We have studied this error for almost more than a solar cycle duration, and our results show drastic changes in the error. Another concern in the daytime is in the low latitude is the equatorial annihilation anomaly, which is generated by vertical E cross-B drift of plasma. This is just a kind of a cartoon showing the horizontal variations in the electron density, with peak occurring around the Bhopal, Surat, and this Hyderabad, Nagpur, and Ahmedabad region, joining the Kolkata and West Bengal at the peak of the anomaly crest. Then anomaly crest keep on shifting with respect to solar activity, seasons, and then there are several other dramatic effects associated with like winds and space weather changes. So is the daytime also, low latitude has a large variability, in night time also. And if you see a structure, vertical structure, at 100 kilometer the electron densities are less. At F region or 350 kilometer, they are very peak of the electron density in the structure and the globe. At 400 kilometer, again because of the decreasing electron density. And you see at different longitudes at the same time show different kind of variability. There is a solar cycle variability when we see the diurnal variation of almost 1/3 in the low solar activity of the high solar activity. You see this effect in the diurnal TEC. These are the studies which we have done. Now coming to one more area which affect the low latitude ionosphere is called the space weather effect. And space weather is nothing but, you see here, the earth is very small with respect to sun and its gigantic phenomena which is called the flares and the coronal mass ejections. It can have effect within 8 minutes. It can have effect of radiation storm within 15 minutes to 24 hours. It can have a geometric storm effect which starts from 1 day to 4 days or even 7 days of observation. That can cause aurora in the high latitude. It can damage some of the high latitude electrical system, and even now we know that low latitude electrical systems are also affected. So radio communication and satellite systems, astronaut in this thing, and navigation satellites all over the globe are affected because of ionospheric changes. This left cartoon shows that so many activities of the modern society in the space are affected by the space weather. I have just plotted here just for your kind of interest, fetching your interest. You see here, these are some of the recent results from our Navicsat signal and TEC. Monthly mean TEC I have shown here, and each month some storms have occurred. These are shown by different color scales. You see, each storm produces a different kind of effect in different months. And since the storms varying intensity are there, varying effect are there, background TEC is different, so much complexity is there with respect to local time, with respect to the storm local time, the penetration electric field, disturbance dynamo, several kind of effects are there. So we see the enhancements, we see the decrements, we see the structures in the ionosphere which are very important to study if you want to resolve the ionospheric corrections. What are the opportunity available for a user? So we have several thousands of receiver. You see here, the data is available on internet on these sites, IGS and UNAVECO, just to study the ionospheric effects, and also to study the atmospheric effects, to study any kind of algorithm trial. People do geodesy using this data set. People measure the plate tectonic movements. These are all the investment from several institutes and several countries which are actually available for any user at this moment freely. So these are the global resources which any user like you people can use it and try to come into the contemporary science or the applications. We have also used these global resources, and we studied one of the recent space weather event, which is we used something like 90 GPS stations. There was an event where the solar, wind, and magnetic field have shown large fluctuation. IMF BJAD has turned multiple times south and north, and what we see, there are like 5 major storms or substorms that have occurred during the 2 days of 17 and 18 March. Now, how individual effects are coming at a particular time, that's what I was telling, that each storm shows different effects in terms of the interplanetary parameter, in terms of the magnetospheric parameter, in terms of the ionospheric parameters. So how it comes into the terms of TEC is very interesting thing from storm to storm. These results, if we see from satellite, we see that from CNOP satellite, depletions are seen or irregularity in the TEC during night time, and in daytime you see large scale decrease in that electron density in the F-region and above. This is control day, this is the storm day. This is yellow control day, this is the storm day. And these are the differences, global TEC differences. You see, this is snapshot on particular time of a day on 18 March, and large negative values are there in the low latitude. However, positive values are there over equator, and very low level, low values or enhancements are there in the mid latitude and the high latitude. So you see, within a given time, drastic impacts are there from minus 120 TC to 40 TC units spread around the globe, and each effect needs to be explained in terms of the phenomena, mechanism, why it should happen, where it should happen, when it should happen. All these things are there, so we are doing these studies. And ultimately, one last but not the least, what opportunity is there, that if you put a GPS satellite in a low earth orbit, then it calls the radio occultation. And occultation is a technique, is an old technique, but now it is used for ionospheric and atmospheric research. Using the GPS signal, we get the vertical profile of atmospheric temperature and humidity from the data. These are all satellites which are past mission. Presently, Cosmic and Formosat, Plantic and Iridium, these are the missions which are providing the data sets. We have our Navig satellites also, which we can use for some plasmasphere TEC, ionosphere TEC variations. We can get the vertical electron density profile using the GPSRO. For opportunities for a global user, there are several data processing techniques, the web servers, GPS toolboxes, several things are available. One of the good thing I have shown here is from the NOAA. You can follow any of these links and grow your knowledge. What are the challenges? So as I have mentioned, in high resolution measurements or observations are not there, which are required for following objective. Like I have said, low latitude phenomena. We need to have coordinated observations, and we need to follow them observations in intense workshops and quantify one issue at a time. We need to do that as a group. People, if you are listening and you have receivers, please come forward. You lead some study which you propose. You use our data set. We will use your data set sometime when we propose something. Let us come together and join the hands to actually resolve these issues. And then it's a very interesting science is there. Let us do that science together. So without coming together, I think it is going to be difficult. We need to form the work group ourselves. We can define, and then later we can join some bigger body. There are several other engineering and the science problems, like we can do modeling, neural network based model, data assimilative model, density profile model, machine learning models, and we can also develop the software defined radio. We are also developing. So in each of the domain we are working, and we definitely look forward for receiving the contribution from our community and friends. We have grown a small network of something like 13 to 14 receivers. From 2012 we were having 5 receivers around Gadanki. Then we have grown in 2014, then 2016. At this moment we have a kind of small chain. These pink receivers are planned right now at this moment. Other receivers are already installed. What is the way forward? The way forward is that we need to actually see that this is my view, that I have put these boxes like science and research. There are data or observations, and there are applications. So unless we shake hand or these boxes meet each other, it is very difficult to grow any one particular box. Like for the science and research, we want the observations and data, which includes the raw data analysis, quality checks, processing scheme, algorithms, and techniques. So when there are experts in this domain, they need to actually communicate with the experts in this domain, which are already very complex science, and specific domains are there in earth science, in geodesy, in the remote sensing GIS, in terms of ionospheric plasma, the tropospheric water vapor. This dynamics and science and research is growing. This is a separate field. Then what is the another field is the beauty for satellite navigation is that there are application, plethora of applications. And unless these three boxes actually handshake, any two or all three, a complete loop cannot be generated. And we always see that there is a broken link for one particular set of people. Like there are people in this workshop also, they are expert in one of these domains. So we think, or my particular view is that we should come together. As I said previously, we should make a feedback with each other, so that we can at least identify some problems and resolve them jointly. Maybe several talks you have listened about these applications. I will not go into detail, but the economy is depending on the future of economy on GNSS and Navig. You can ask me any questions now, or you can also email me later at my email ID ndashore@nirl.go.in. You can ask any sort of query under this sky, whatever I have presented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dasora. I am really impressed by your presentation. You started with a very elementary things, and you developed the subject. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So you have nicely developed the subject, and gradually you went to different research area that it is opening up by
Yes.
GNSS and Navig research.
Yes, sir.
And I also liked your um, last slides that you proposed for a consortium, uh,
Yes, sir.
rather uh,
Yes.
grouping different
Yeah.
groups who are
Exactly.
working in isolated way.
Yes, sir.
They
Yes,
should
sir.
they should form a consortium so that there is
Yes.
a proper handshading
Yes, sir.
to deal with the different uh, emerging areas
Yes, sir.
in depth.
Yes, sir.
That's a good idea. That sort of group should be put together so that then there is a lot of facilities around India and also across the globe, and
Yes,
there is open platform data is available,
yes,
so that sort of things can be done. It's a good idea, and you can work on it to put forward this idea across the different scientific forum.
yes, sir. Actually, our director, Dr. A.K. Patra, is also very keen in growing this kind of community coming
Uh,
together,
uh,
and he
uh,
is doing
uh,
his special efforts towards that.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you for this idea,
Yes, sir.
and it's a good thing. So now I am quite sure that many participants are eager to uh, talk to you. Let
Yes, sir.
us put it. Let us start with the chat box mode.
Yeah.
I must be thinking that there may be several questions is in the chat box. Yeah.
Okay. I will also see. Shall I
Uh,
stop my presentation at the moment?
do you have anything to further present?
No, no, nothing. There's if somebody asks clarification, then that is okay.
No,
Otherwise, I can.
let us start the chat box, and
Okay, sir.
in that case, you can always put
Fine, sir.
forward
Fine.
your presentation for explanation and all these things.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah.
So uh, you can go through the chat box one by one and answer the question. If it is not possible for you to conveniently look at the chat box, I'd request Jaideep. Jaideep, are you here? Jaideep, please unmute. uh, unmute your speaker, and maybe he's not there because
Okay.
you have completed your lecture well in advance.
Okay, okay.
Uh, uh,
No, I
uh,
thought that maybe more discussion will be useful.
okay, that's
Mm,
fine. That's
mm,
fine. No problem.
yeah.
So you can go through the chat box and take up the question, naming who has put the questions for
Okay.
the information of the participants, or I can help you if you have any problem.
Okay. Okay. So there is one question by Shrinu. Uh, uh, yeah, Shrinu, please ask your question. It is about the tropospheric model, which is generally used in nowadays in GNSS receiver. Shrinu, are you online?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, please tell me what is your clarification about?
Uh, so there are many empirical models are there, sir, in predicting the tropospheric delay. And I come
Okay.
across literature. So
Okay.
which is generally used uh, with respect to Indian context. Is it a spatially dependent or of course it is not spatially dependent as per the speakers. Uh,
Okay.
for the Indian context, whether it is there any tropospheric model, just like ionospheric, we have some specific models. So which are used.
Okay. Okay. Uh, Actually, this also is a lot of research has happened on what question you have asked. It's a very good question. If you really see the water vapor in tropical latitudes varies with respect to time and space. It is as dynamic as I have shown some results, and maybe in my next speaker will show you some of the results about the dynamics of the water vapor or humidity. We know our monsoon, those 4 or 5 months, and then how it travels over India. So the water vapor, which is integrated content and creates a delay, has definitely a large dynamic portion which needs to be corrected. So it cannot be a one model which can represent everything. So there are several models available, like Niels mapping function. People use mapping function and then Janet delay model, and there are models for the tropospheric wet delay also, and there are models for total delay also. So the international community has agreed on some models which are Sustamonian model. I think that is the one which many people use. for the water vapor. But those models I am telling you are not any good for the tropical weather and the tropical dynamics of the water vapor. So what people do generally, they have a receiver which is called the reference station. They install at some place, and then they continuously observe that place for say 1 year or so, or at least few seasons of monsoon. And then using the surface measurements, they use the surface humidity and temperature, and get the potential integrated potential temperature of the atmosphere, which actually is using the delay conversion into the wet delay. So they have the special location specific models. Like for Hyderabad, there will be different model. For even Gadanki, there will be different. For Bangalore, different, because it's a especially dynamic quantity. There are models which are also regional models, which more or less correct the ionosphere, but depends upon Shrinu, depends upon accuracy, how much you are actually wanting from the GPS signal. Because you are correcting the delay. It is not the assessment of the delay. You are correcting the delay. So how much accuracy you want, that much accurate should be our model corrections. So as I know, tropical weather and the dynamics of the water vapor is highly variable. One really need to work more on this aspect. Hope I am able to clarify your question.
Yes, sir. You said Sastro-Menon, that is the model.
Yes,
generally.
yeah.
Okay.
But don't use that blind eyed. Okay, you have to actually do some research when you are actually doing some corrections.
Okay, sir. So
Yeah, there are papers in JGR and Atmosphere and Atmospheric Research and several journals. So if you are interested, I will forward you. But there is a lot of research, no doubt in that. I also started that work, but since my domain is ionosphere, some people are in NARL, like you may be aware, they are also doing water vapor using GPS receiver, Dr. T. Naran Rao and his group. So you can always connect with those people for more details if you want.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Daswara,
Yes,
I
sir.
have some related, my curiosity to know
Yes, sir.
that ready-made, for example, standard GPS receivers, maybe a
Yes.
geodetic receiver,
Yes, sir.
they have inbuilt tropospheric model into it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ah.
And you just now told that one model may not be sufficient to take care of all the things for all latitude and
Yes, sir. Yes.
so now the users who are having a receiver,
Yes, sir.
they'll have to depend on whatever inbuilt because he doesn't have a provision
Yes, sir.
to reprogram the tropospheric model
Yes,
or
sir.
put a better model.
Yes,
I'd
sir.
like to have your comment in this respect.
Okay, sir. Actually, this is how concept of our Gagan has come. Gagan is a satellite program which is between the ISRO and the Airport Authority of India. It all started with Airport Authority asking for the in-air navigation using the GPS, but they were not knowing what are the corrections from the different parts. So ISRO took up that project and they actually completed. What it has been done is that first one need to develop some realistic kind of correction models for ionosphere as well as troposphere using the long-term data set or whatsoever be. How you develop is, but then it is to be parameterized so that a user can receive those parameters, and at particular location, particular time, he knows what is the model broadcast error. So the Gagan satellite program is for that purpose. ISRO has put 2 or 3 geostationary satellite. From the command center, the corrections are broadcasted. First correction models are developed. Those are broadcasted. Those satellite again broadcast in the L1 frequency. So the receiver can receive those the new or the better forecast model and apply those errors into corrections and then get the better accuracy in the position. Sir, this is only for the Gagan. Now, any general user who is not having a kind of Gagan enabled signal or something, they have to depend on what GPS is broadcasting, what GLONASS is broadcasting, what European Union, this Galileo or the BEDU. For Navik, we also have the broadcast error messages for the correction of the troposphere as well as ionospheric model. And now there is a lot of research happening on your question, what you have asked, that which model a user should prefer. So at this moment in India, what we believe is that the Gagan models are kind of better performing or at the par with what GPS models are there. The only issue with GPS model which is known is they are made for mid-latitude kind of very small gradients. The gradient which we observe in low latitude or the tropical latitude are not inbuilt in those parameters or the coefficients. So that's why ISRO or other people have worked over those gradients, but still there is a lot of scope, I'm telling you, and a lot of research which needs to be done before we really say that we have got rid of the tropospheric error or the ionospheric error. They are only model, they are not the accurate error. So still there is a chance that you have not resolved the full error. Again, I will come back to you. What is your accuracy you want? If you want 10-meter accuracy and above that, then all models for all practical purposes are good. Because we know that tropospheric error maximum it can grow up to 2.6 to 3 meter. Ionospheric error is the major error, but if you have two frequency receiver, you can remove it. Otherwise, it's a major challenge at this moment also, even for our Navik and Gagan system. And other errors, more or less, somebody can broadcast or believe the broadcast. So basic error, which are the tropospheric and ionosphere, research is required, sir, at this moment. I hope I have clarified. Yeah.
No, I got your point.
Yes,
Only thing that in this connection,
yes, sir.
I would like to refer that yesterday there were many speakers
Yes,
who
sir.
opened up one important thing is that
Yes,
there are very high-end receiver now available
Yes.
which has a provision, it has a open architecture,
Yeah.
and you can also open platform
Yeah.
that you can reconfigure your receiver by
Yeah.
your design.
Yeah.
And in that case, I think whatever suitable model, particularly for the particularly local area like in India, maybe Gagan may be the best one.
Okay.
So that can be, I believe that can be put into the receiver to make it work.
Okay.
That is my guess.
Only one comment, sir. Again, many people who are new to the field, they do not understand that a simple user is having always one single frequency receiver. The reference receiver, nobody goes with 12 lakh, 10 lakh rupees receiver.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
finally, it is a single frequency receiver. So the error messages are either model or the broadcaster's message. Whatever kind of open category receiver you use, it will be single frequency receiver, and the model broadcast has to be taken from the L1 frequency, which is coming from some satellite. Either it is Gagan satellite or GPS satellite. So the model has to be corrected. Whatever receiver excellence is there, there should be a model for tropospheric delay which actually meet the local conditions at that time, at that latitude and longitude, which is still a challenge. That's what I feel.
Okay. Thank you. Now,
Other questions will take.
only I would like to say that
Yeah.
users, the participants may be thinking that their other questions is being ignored. It's not that. It's not that, because the participants put the question that Srinu, and it is discussion related to this.
Yes,
So
sir, exactly.
next question will be coming up.
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. So it is about one question from Mr. Amit Day. He's asking which physical theories are applied in atmospheric science. How accurate are these in characterizing atmosphere? If Amit is there, may I know what exactly you want to ask?
Yes. So first, thanks for your nice talk.
Yeah.
So my question is, from physics sector, which are the theories which has most applications in atmospheric science, and how accurate are this? Because we know this atmosphere is extremely chaotic.
Yeah. So theory means you want to know about the models of the atmosphere?
No, basic physics theories. So you have shown some group velocity and phase velocity
Okay,
and
okay.
probably electromagnetic theory also.
Electromagnetic theory. Yeah. So for atmosphere, basically the electromagnetic theory only, the radio propagation through the random media. That's what the theory which has been used, and it is in the 70s and 80s. It has been growing, and it is now textbook knowledge at this moment. They use the radio refractive index. There is a famous paper by 1974, Thayer, D. Thayer, in JGR. You can search with the title Radio Refractive Index of the Atmosphere. I have taken the equation from there only, and the previous history of the coefficient generation of the refractive index, this K1, K2 and all, they are coming from there. And for the ionosphere, we know that Appleton started that complex refractive index derivation, Appleton-Hartree equation, then a complex electromagnetic theory, magneto-ionic theory was put into, and later on Kenneth Davis published a very big book called Ionospheric Radio in 1980, and 1972 a nice book by Radcliffe. These two shows the magneto-ionic theory and the electromagnetic theory of the wave propagation through ionospheric media. So these are the two books which and the paper which actually give the basic idea about how the atmospheric refraction and the GPS signal connection. I hope you are asking that only.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So shall we move to next question then?
Please.
Yeah. So another question is by Mr. Raj Gaurav. He is telling, sir, can TC is predicted? As you said, it is estimated and day-wise data is available. Can we get some pattern by studying historical TC data? Okay, so good question. TC can be predicted. For that matter, anything can be predicted. Any time series can be predicted, because prediction depends on what do you actually look for in your forecast. So prediction is not an issue. At what accuracy you need a prediction is always a concern. So TC can be predicted. TC is being predicted. Many research groups and research papers are there. You can search for it. But the trouble is that at what accuracy from the observed TC to the predicted TC, we are not matching. Is like maybe even 70% off. Most of the results are 60 to 70% off. For the quiet time, daytime, normal variations, the background itself is not coming forward in prediction. Second thing is, if you use machine learning, like history of the TC data, you are reaching to the nowcasting. Like you can, like next 3 hours, you can do it. But the trouble is again coming in the night time when irregularities are coming. So the physics and the irregularity and the dynamics is so large that even the machine learning is not able to cope up. So during post sunset, forget about our nighttime in low latitude when the scintillations are happening or the TEC depletion, the predictions are failing. Daytime TEC, which is the background TEC, there are some models which can do, but only for nowcasting. I asked them after 10 days, again there are failures. I asked them next year, failures, next season, failures. So how much accurate we want, that question should be targeted in that way. If you want maybe 10 TEC units or 15 TEC units, there are climatic models available like AnyQuick, IRI, or Time GCM, SAMI, some physics-based model, something you put something data into that model. More or less they will provide the structure, large scale structure, basic structure. But the gradients, when we talk longitudinal gradient, latitudinal gradient with respect to time, day and night, season, space weather effects, there are several issues, and I don't think any model at the moment is able to predict the TEC. That's why all the research is about that. Predict the TEC with the exact high accuracy. Yeah.
Now about the TEC,
Yeah.
I think most of the receiver these days using dual frequency,
Yeah.
and which can measure in situ for a particular ray path.
Yes.
Quite accurately,
Yeah.
though to the first order.
Yeah.
So that is being used by most of the receiver these days.
Yeah, most of the dual frequency or even multi-frequency receiver, they use the differential, like what you sir mentioned, that you can, if you have more than one frequency observation, you can get rid of ionospheric error. Actually, two signals are kept for that purpose only in the design, in GPS or even in the transit in 1960s. That it was well aware that ionosphere is dispersive medium. Any satellite, when it is transmitting the signal, will go through ionosphere, and that correction will be required. Is a major correction. So that's why two signals are always being transmitted. Now the issue is that when you have two signals and both are not coming, or one is not coming, for position we require 4 satellites at this moment, and we have seen that out of 12 available satellite, if scintillation is happening, 8 to 9 or 10 satellites are affected simultaneously, and some of them can have a loss of log, means totally signal is not there. The signal goes below the sensitivity level of the receiver. Those are the moments when we call it radio blackout for a user receiver. Other than that, you can always use the dual frequency measurement and rely on the real-time TEC, so that you can correct it and throw it out. But when you have the equatorial plasma bubble, the receiver electronics at this moment is not very advanced. There are advancements which are still working on. I have not seen a paper which is resolving the effect of the scintillation and TEC depletion and then the phase lock loops so efficiently. I have read the latest papers in very good reputed journals. I follow that, but still it is growing area at this moment. Yeah.
Okay, you may take up any other question. Any
Yeah,
other question is it?
in the list it is not there, sir.
So we have for the discussion. So I would request the participants to please come up with your question.
There are 63 participants at this moment, I think.
Yeah, there are many.
They're all online, or maybe they're listening, or yeah, we don't know.
So, but anyway, I would request all the
We are listening,
participants.
sir. Many of queries has been answered already. Amit De sir has asked the question I need to ask, so I'm just
Please
No,
go
no,
on.
thinking if
you
someone
can,
can ask.
madam, you can also ask, no doubt.
Sir, actually, I am not particularly from this domain. I am from the semiconductor design domain, and I'm interested in GNS and NAVIC as a hobby. I like to learn about these things,
Okay.
so I have just participated.
It's good, always welcome, and you can also ask some questions. Like, we are developing receivers also. I mean, some of the companies and ISRO from the I think Shuklaji might have told you. He is from SEC Ahmedabad Space Application Center, and there the receivers for the NAVIC and GNSS have been developed, software receiver as well as the hardware. There are chips which are developed, navigation chips are being developed at different centers. So a lot of electronics is there in this domain, lot of electronics.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to look into application and to if there is any area if I could
Yeah.
go for PhD, sir. I'm an MTech. I've just completed my MTech this
Okay,
year.
you are working as a lecturer somewhere?
No, sir. I've just completed. I've applied for the PhD in different institute. I haven't got enrolled in anywhere
Okay.
currently.
Okay, yeah, you can search appropriate institute and yeah, continue your work.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I can see Dr. OP Singh if he's online. Then who else I know? Many people I'm seeing first time.
I'd request participants, please come up. We have Simon Experts is here to really answer your questions, and it's a good opportunity for you.
No, I actually like to interact because that the goal is to communicate with our community so that they get a confidence while talking. And
No, also for the participants who are doing research and all these things, this is a unique opportunity for them to interact with you.
Yeah, some clarification always we can have, sir. Yeah, no doubt in that. Yeah.
So please come forward. And this is a unique opportunity that relevant expert is here. So you can please come forward with your questions.
Ask any question, no doubt in that. Don't hesitate. I thought of adding more slide because I was thinking that it will be 1.5 hours or 2 hours. but then loading participant with so much of information, like my results or this basics, that basics, and repeating things, I thought that I would kind of ask the participant what they want to kind of clarify. Yeah, one more question is coming. It is from Niranjan Kumar. How long GPS data is reliable? Okay, Mr. Niranjan, if you can ask again, reliable in what sense? Please clarify. Hello. Okay, in accuracy. So GPS at this moment, if you are having single frequency receiver, then it can provide you up to kind of 2 to 3 meter accuracy with ionospheric corrections applied, good corrections applied. If there are L1 frequency receiver in GPS, and you are using the old Klobuchar model of GPS ionosphere, then is a high trouble. Which I am telling you, static point. Accuracy is not a single statement. Remember, accuracy is a dynamic statement. What if a user is moving? Then once you have got the position, then GPS receiver has algorithms. It uses that last position as your position and then removes, and it knows that what velocity you are moving. Quickly it finds out some average velocity from one point to another point, 2 to 3 epochs it takes, or few seconds. Then it starts following your velocity and uses your previous position as reference. Then all other errors it actually nullifies. So if you are moving in a GPS receiver, remember that accuracy can go much better, even 1 meter or even less. But if you are static, if you are not moving, and you want to find out a point location, what is my exact location, I can tell you GPS will not provide better than even 10 meter accuracy for a given location, because with respect to ionosphere changing, ionospheric phenomena coming, it depends on the time of the day, local time of the day accuracy. If you are finding the point measurement, it's called precise point positioning. So you need to have dual frequency receiver for accuracy. And GPS signal is highly reliable. It is being used throughout the globe. I started my work with GPS signal only, and even other signals all are reliable, more or less. Now any GNSS provide accuracy in dynamic mode better, in differential mode better, but when precise point positioning comes and no ionosphere model, no troposphere model, accuracy will be around 10 meter. Same thing goes for Navik. Hope I have answered your question. Any other question?
Please come forward. There may be many researchers working in the atmospheric field. You may come forward, whatever doubts you may have. Even he is ready to answer.
Other things also. Yeah. Related to under this umbrella, whatever you ask, whatever my experience is there, I would be able to answer.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the informative talk. Just as you mentioned earlier that machine learning has some limitation with GPS data. But if suppose we are using high-end computation system, then looking at your point of view, is it feasible to apply machine learning algorithms for at the stage of GPS signal?
Thank you, Darshana, for your question. Actually, machine learning, if you are working in this domain, you know that is a very fast growing domain, very fast growing. In several aspects of our modern technology, we use machine learning, and we train the system and we forecast the future state of the system. Same goes true for any parameter like dynamical parameter, which is like TEC or the ionospheric delay. Now, if you use the machine learning techniques, then assume that I have a single point observation. I am sitting at NARL. I have a time series for last 10 years. Okay. Now it has variation which I have shown, diurnal variation, then seasonal variation, solar cycle, all kinds of. Then you put on the time series. Now you have a time series which is my 10 years of data, but 1 point. If you feed that into machine learning program of whatever sense neural network or the light GBM or whatever you use, it will ask you some inputs. Means what is that TEC is correlated with. So TEC is correlated with solar flux, you give input. You give local time, you give day of the year, season, then you give the DST index, then you give the some drift parameter, ionosphere, whatever 8 to 10 parameters you input, then train it. Ultimately, it gives you, after training, a TEC over a single point. When you require time, it gives you TEC, but only over 1 point. Now you understand that if I put a two-dimensional model in training, okay, two-dimensional
Yes,
model means two-dimensional observations. At a given moment of time, I have an image of TEC. Now this is not available. This is where we are stuck. Where is the TEC map available in India? So TEC map, whatever is available, is very coarse resolution. It is around 5 by 5 degree, and there also 24 hours we don't have continuity of the observations. That was
yes,
the aim. That was the aim, to develop a network of receivers so that at least in particular latitude and particular longitude we have continuous observation. At least we will be able to know according to along a longitude what is happening in ionosphere, along a latitude what is happening. This was the motive. In India, there are several receivers with several people. They are not coming forward to provide the data or get together to get this map. Once we have a map at snapshot of ionosphere in TEC terms, or a time, let us say hourly TEC I have, then I can feed this map into the neural network. Definitely my forecast will improve. Now, what kind of forecast you are talking, one need to understand whether I'm talking about next hour, whether I'm
yes,
talking
sir.
about next day, whether I'm talking about next season, or like a climatological forecast. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Again, if you are going for climatological forecast, if you are forecasting for solar high, then I should have trend for solar high, isn't it? So I should
Yeah,
have this data set for past solar cycle, whole 10 years of data, 11 years of data, so that I can forecast for next solar cycle, isn't it?
yeah,
So neural machine learning is equally limited how much input we give it to it, isn't it?
yeah. Yes,
it
sir.
will it will train the information, whatever information given to it. It will not do beyond that. It is the intelligence that we are generating or making it. So unless we really have those data sets or observations to train a machine learning program, we will not get the relevant output. So at the best, we have assumed that 1 point observation, then forecast comes very good. But like our NARL forecast is very good. I will say, like, I can even forecast 10 days TEC. But if I move just away from Gadangi, I come to Tirupati, 30 kilometer away, that forecast will fail. What is use of this? Isn't it?
Yes,
So,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
so you are getting the perspective that unless we have a good data set to train the machine learning programs, for that matter, any delay, ionospheric delay or tropospheric delay, we will not be able to produce those kind of forecast which we require for the user. Now,
Yes, sir. So,
now there is an argument that the user actually require nowcast. What is happening at this moment? Maybe at the best, next 2 hours you give me. Okay, next 2 hours I will give you. But do I have at the present all over India the observation available? Because user is anywhere over India, isn't it? So
hmm.
those observations are not available. ISRO has also tried their level best to put the grids network, but there is a limitation for several kind of like logistics and operation and all those things. Unless agencies which are interested users come together, that's why community sense has to grow. It will take time, but in other nations it has happened. India also it will happen, and we look forward. I hope I have
Yes, sir.
answered.
Yeah, yes, sir, exactly. So our data set should be enough strong that we can have multiple data from multiple locations. Then it
Exactly.
can be,
Exactly.
yeah, it can be fruitful. Yeah, thank
Yes.
you very much,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Dr.
One more
Dasora, you have,
question is that.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Before that, let me
Uh,
just tell you, you
yes,
have
sir.
nicely explained the limitation of using the machine
Yes, sir.
learning language at the present
Exactly.
moment. And
Exactly.
you
I
have
do that.
also suggested in your presentation that
Yes,
how
sir.
this limitation of the data can be solved by handshaking different groups and
Yes, sir.
share. because you
Yes.
never know. There are new, umpteen number of receivers. They
They are
are
there, sir.
taking data, but data is not shared.
Data is not
So
shared.
your handshaking will do, and that
Yes.
may in the future may solve the problem, and you
Yes.
have a enough number of data with a even the grid separation of 1 degree.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is possible. It is possible.
Oh, okay. Thank
Uh,
you. Now you take up the next question.
Yeah. Kaushik Bishai is asking that I want to know why GPS, GLONASS, BIDU or Galileo receiver modules are used in our smartphone but never a NAVIC receiver. Okay, I think this particular workshop is aimed to tell you only that there is a NAVIC chip available from 2020 July onwards. All the companies like your Snapdragon and all your processor making companies, they are advised and given a lot of help, technical support from ISRO to provide the NAVIC signal inbuilt in every smartphone, whichever is being launched in India now. So I think if you purchase a new smartphone, NAVIC is inbuilt. Yeah, I hope I have answered your question.
Kaushik, I would rather request you to forward this question to Colonel Neville, who spoke on it,
Exactly.
and he's
Exactly.
here. He's
Yeah.
he's working on NAVIC receivers and
Exactly.
making a group. He will be
Yes.
able to answer more detail that
Yeah.
about this. So
Yes.
this his address you will get it from the Dr. Anindo's group.
Okay. One more question has come, sir, from Mr. Niranjan Kumar. He's asking, sir, please tell me which part I have to take part in research in GPS. Okay, that depends on what your interest and your background is there. So if you can tell us more, Mr. Niranjan, if you are online, what is your so far academics?
Sir, good morning,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
I did MSc in physics from
Okay.
Magad University, MPhil
Okay.
in microwave from Bardhaman University,
Okay.
and the multi-wall carbon nanotube from
Okay.
Bhim Rao Ambedkar Bihar University.
Okay. So you are
So
doing in
my-
material science? Material science?
No, sir, I am physics background.
No, but your basic research, any research little bit in material science?
And no, sir, multi-wall carbon nanotube as a radar observing material.
Oh, okay. 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 So, okay. Since you are participant here, but that depends on your interest, which part of your academics you want to grow. If you want to do PhD, then there are institutes take the PhD, like we NRL also. You
Sir,
need
I
to
have
have
did
the
my
NET
PhD,
JRF
sir.
and so that.
Hello, sir,
Oh, you
I
have
have
finished.
did my PhD. Yes, sir, I have finished.
So the nanotube structure is basically which domain? It falls in which domain? Material science or
Just analytical research, surface plasmon, that type of research is going on in my field.
theoretical?
Theoretical, yes, sir.
Okay, theoretical physics. Okay, so in that case, you can, if you want to really use your simulation power or your understanding of equations, then you can do this GPS receiver, software receiver. There are several algorithms which require knowledge of the hardware, electronics, into as making as a software. So if you can do that part as electronics, that is one thing. And in simulation, in physics domain, if you want to do, then ionospheric or the tropospheric simulations are one of the best. Like you can use some weather model and start getting the weather parameter and then put this data into it. So it's called data assimilative model. Theoretical physics. Then one more theoretical physics which is coming is like scintillation models. They right now we have no scintillation model. We have TEC model, TEC model, the delay model, but the irregularity, how it is generated, only very few groups are working customarily also, and because of the subject domain is very difficult, very few people work. So how the radio wave propagate through the phase screens, several phase screens of the atmosphere, that those simulations are very important from theoretical point of view. Russian groups or the American groups work on that, but in India, I have not seen. There were people like Dasgupta sir and his group. They have been doing it, but still they are like observational scientists or experimental. Theoretical knowledge or simulation in the scintillation irregularity, ionospheric plasma irregularity, particularly simulations. If you want to do, I think you are welcome. Another question is by Tamal Basak. Dr. Basak is known to me. He's asking about, is it possible to predict accuracy cyclone like Gulab provided by dense GPS network available? Okay. Cyclone prediction, there's like decades of research in cyclone prediction. What GPS has added in the component is the accuracy of rainfall, accuracy of the path of the cyclone, and accuracy of humidity and vertical temperature measurements. Now, how this goes into a bigger model, we call it WRF model, isn't it? Reference model of the atmosphere. Those numerical simulation models or numerical weather forecast model take the data from GPS. They provide more accurate forecast for the GPS, but that data has to go to the numerical weather forecast model, which is actually trend for the cyclone forecasting. Direct GPS, the water vapor observation, I don't think they can forecast the cyclone. They have total tropospheric delay as a information, two-dimensional information. If you have the network of the GPS receiver, it goes into the numerical weather forecast. There are 40 or 50 state parameters. The tropospheric water vapor is one of the state parameter of the atmosphere. So those other things, this also matches well and then provides a better forecast. That much I know. So it can help the better forecast. It cannot forecast by itself.
Okay, means it is, as you were saying, it is like one of the 40 or 50 parameters this TECR GPS can be used.
Exactly, but since water vapor carries other parameter along with it, isn't it? Water vapor variation itself. So those parameter correlation also is taken care. That's why the forecast is better.
Okay, means one small another question that this, like the windy.com, the website is there. They use this GPS TEC data as their one of the parameters or not?
No. The GPS Windy use only the forecast model. This is like the models work without even data going into it. Most of the model which are like simulation, they are basic model like mathematical equations. They use some past information and they give a forecast. Now many websites or the many apps have come which use these kind of models from IMD or from the other USA or UK based model. They provide forecast. But how accurate are they? Nobody validates. You ask them question, they will keep quiet. So issue is that you try to follow some validated forecast like IMD is providing, or even our NARL provides forecast. We have that system that we forecast, we validate, we see where we are failing, then we try to improve upon it. There is always a integrity associated with forecast, like how much forecast can go wrong, false alarm system, everything. So Windy is one of the commercial application which provide a large scale forecast model, but they do not take GPS observation at this moment, as I know.
Okay, sir, I understand. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
There's another question by Raj Gaurav. He's telling that you are talking making network of GPS data countrywide. Nowadays, mobiles are also coming with dual frequency receiver and data logger available. Will mobile data will be helpful in monitoring experiment purpose? NMEA logs are available. Okay, very good question. A little involved question. Mobile, as we know, is a handheld device, and even if it is receiving the continuous observations, it moves with a man. So where a man or a user goes, it will go. The GPS signal or NAVIC signal are known for line of sight. The obstruction from civil construction, the canopy structure of the vegetation, or any other multipath structure, signal is not there. Signal cannot travel. Is a line of sight signal, remember, and very low SNR. It is not very strong signal. It's not like mobile signal everywhere. Not there. It's a line of sight signal. So when I talk about network, these are the network of the permanent reference station. Is a having antenna, having a RF cable, a very good sophisticated receiver, so that it provides continuous observation from that site. Whatever receivers, satellites it is observing, such systems should be there available. One thing. Second thing, we can use this mobile data, no doubt in that. But they are like bits and pieces of data will be coming from everywhere. And again, since this mobile is in motion, it is moving. we don't know your location exactly. So location again is coming from GPS only, which is using some particular model. So again, you see, unless you have a dual frequency Rhinox record from a stable location, more or less, I think the data will not be useful. I'm telling you, you don't require ionospheric model if you are using dual frequency receiver. You are telling a dual frequency receiver in mobile means ionosphere error is gone. Professor Banerjee has already told that if you have a dual frequency receiver in the mobile, ionospheric error most of the time is gone. Other than those scintillation cases I told you during the post sunset, during some season, during solar cycle, this thing. Other than that, ionospheric error is taken care of if you have dual frequency. Only thing is tropospheric delay, which needs to be corrected. So I don't know whether it will be helping any experiment, your NMEA logs. We require the Rhinox data. NMEA logs only provide the final estimated location. We require Rhinox data. Yeah.
Sir, if you have some time, can I
Yeah,
raise
please.
one question regarding?
Please. I have a lot of time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Actually, I worked a little bit under Professor Dashgupta sir and Shamal Chakraborty sir regarding
Yeah.
ionospheric phenomena and its effects on SBAS operation and other satellite navigation issues.
Yeah.
What you mentioned is very important one, that theoretical modeling or theoretical study regarding the ionospheric irregularity evolution or their development or the decaying phase is yet to be explored through theoretical models, as you
Yeah.
correctly pointed out. I
Yeah.
think Malabagia group from probably IIG or PRL probably, they work under, they work for this type of issues. Sir, can you
I
please?
know Malavagia. She was my contemporary. She did on
Okay.
source satellite electron density PhD, and she was in Rajkot University for some time. Later on, she moved to IIG, and she is now doing the earthquake related geodesy and using GPS for that. But she is not associated with
Okay.
the numerical simulation. That much I
So,
know.
sir, can you please enlighten on any groups they are working on the theoretical, theoretical aspect of
Exactly.
regularity development?
If you know by some means Dr. Archana Bhattacharya of
Yeah.
IIG, she was former director. She is the beacon for this kind of studies in India, and she has been doing it consistently throughout her career. And
Yeah.
her students who are now IIG faculty, they are carrying her legacy forward. But they also use the observations most of the
Yes,
time.
yes.
They are not doing theoretical simulation. They are doing scintillation, like our radio physics department of Kolkata University.
Right.
Professor Ashik Paul, he has been also doing throughout very categorically and very painstaking effort for scintillation studies. What I mentioned here is that numerical simulations of three-dimensional ionospheric phase screen modeling and the effect of the radio wave propagation, I don't
Right.
think in India anybody is doing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Right now, no more questions, sir.
As I can see, but still I can encourage few more questions if there is any.
I am ready. I am enjoying actually now.
Unless Dasera, you are in a hurry to quit.
No, sir. Actually, this is Saturday and I am at home, and only some afternoon I have some work after 2 o'clock. After that, I'm free.
Okay. So please, participant, please come forward if you have any questions. Even you can directly put the questions through your
Yeah.
speaker.
Yeah.
So by the time let the participants frame their questions, I would like to discuss little bit with Dr. Dasera on what is
Yeah.
your impression about the recent solar storm is being predicted or alerted to the all the
Newspapers that is coming.
scientists at
Yeah.
the planet, and
Yeah. Newspapers. Yeah.
and do you anticipate that there may be some more stronger effect on the equatorial region or mid-latitude region?
Actually, I also followed some of the newspaper stories and in social media and everything. Last month, there were two major news articles by NASA, and some of the media has picked up. It is actually about the space weather coming from the sun in terms of coronal mass ejections. It has so happened that the 1859 there was one of the gigantic storm that has surpassed even the DST of minus 500 nanotesla or minus 600 in beyond that, because that is like estimated figure. If that kind of storm happens, then our modern technological system, how much it will be affected or a catastrophe may come, is the news article about that. Now, only issue about the coronal mass ejections is the solar physics. We don't know when it will come out. So there is a connection of the solar physics. We need to know the sun, its dynamics, it's all whatever as a star and as a big black body. Coming to the point that how much Earth will be affected, if you are aware, in 2012 there was a storm, a CME, which was opposite side of the sun, not our side, but it was a class of the storm which has not happened in last 4 or 5 decades, but it has not come to the Earth. So we were so lucky that it has not come. So there is always a chance that when the solar activity is growing, now we are growing phase right now 2021, so new solar cycle 25 has started. So there is a chance that when we grow in transition phase from low solar to high and come back high to low, some such events can happen. Not now, tomorrow, not now, next year, but slowly as the cycle picks up. Nobody can forecast at this moment. So that article was about that it can happen, and if it happens to the Earth, then it can damage, first of all, many satellites which are around our Earth. Their orbit can be disturbed because so much pressure is coming from solar wind with high speed. Lot of electrical energy in terms of the current and the electrons is deposited at high latitude, and because the currents flow from high latitude to low latitude, electric field map, there is a effect on our electrical grids. Surface currents are found to increase. So we are just waiting for a study which will connect all these aspects, and lot of research is there. Actually, in America, if you see, there is a separate program called Space Weather Program or Living with the Star. NASA has that SCO step. It is called SCO-STEP. A lot of information is available about what you are talking. Living with Star is another this thing. So those programs are focused, they are global programs. We also participate and we also give our input, and we observe globally those events and we see. But as far as forecast is concerned, there is no guarantee, no warranty. It can happen, it cannot happen. This is the knowledge at this moment, sir.
I was told that there is a good network of heliospheric observatories operating across the world, around the world.
Yes.
So we are expecting that there may be a fairly accurate alert about the solar storm.
Correct, sir. Correct. Now, when you talk about alert, means you are talking about something has happened on sun, and since it will take at least 8 hours to 24 hours to reach to the Earth, that alert can be 1 day before. That's what I'm telling you. Is a nowcasting. Once a storm has happened, and if somebody is observing, because we have a stereo of so many satellites, so many observatories, they can accurately tell how much effect it will come to the Earth. But even every storm has its own structure, its own the electric and magnetic plasma and configuration, its own impact. Apart from that, definitely alert can be there. There are alert right now going on. There is a Space Weather Center in NASA. You just typed SWPC, Space Weather Prediction Center, SWPC in Google. You will immediately get what right now happening on the sun and how it is going to affect. What I'm talking is that you cannot tell when the solar CME will happen. That's all I'm telling. Alert can be there once it happens.
I was told that there is a good network of heliospheric observatories operating around the world, around the world. So we are expecting that there may be some more stronger effect on the equatorial region or mid-latitude region. So
I hope I have clarified, sir.
Of debate going on this issue.
Sir, related to this question sir has asked, sir, I have read this book. I have just written in the comment section, Arts Professional Space by Dr. Chanchana, ma'am. Sir, this book I have read in my college from my college library, but I wanted to look if you know if I can find it somewhere. I can't find it again.
Which one?
Sir, Arts Proaxial Space by Dr. Chanchana Uber.
In our library, I know it is not there, but I can always you email me with this reference ISBN and that number. If I find, I will try to give you information.
So ebook means sir, I have tried to search everywhere if I could buy it, but I thought you are talking about all this, so I thought you might.
No. See, you can always find alternative books for the same text. There are a lot of information explosion happening. If I know about the book and the content, I can suggest you something else. You send me the information through email.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So we have enough discussions, and still, if there is a very pertinent question, we can encourage.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
one Mr. Vikrant Chaudhary is asking about some 5G antenna, but I am not related with 5G. I cannot answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
And right now, nothing is there.
So, if it is not there, I would like to close this again by saying that Dr. Dasera has really given a lot of patience to answer all sorts of questions given to him by all the participants, and I am thankful for the participants for your encouraging response and tried to get yourselves educated by the experts. And I would like to thank Dr. Nirvika Dasora particularly for your excellent presentation with a lot of information. And it's not only information, it's a very educative for the beginners. You
Yes,
have
sir.
started with a very elementary things and developed the subject so nicely.
Yes, sir.
And thank you very much for all your time and your patience to handle all these sorts of questions, right from the very trivial one to a very challenging one. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you, sir. I am deeply indebted for your very kind words and encouragement, sir. I am junior, and I require your blessings in future for continuing. And I am also learning through this people interaction, so I like that interaction. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
sir.
very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think I should take off from you now.
Okay, please.
Okay, sir.
Friends, please wait for 2-3 minutes for the next speaker to come up.